Well, we'll come round into the vegetable garden where we've been growing horseradish in this little patch for, it's probably been in here 8 or 9 years, and it's spread out to form these quite wide clumps. Now this is all going to have to move later this season because we've got building work going on just to the side of this area. So what I'm going to do now is dig some of this horseradish up and show you what the roots look like in an established clump. But it really is worthwhile getting some of this. You can buy it from garden centres or grow it from seed. It takes about 3 or 4 years to get a decent sized patch for you to harvest, but it's worthwhile growing if you really do love horseradish sauce. So let's get digging, show you what the roots look like. Well, I've got a spade right under this great big clump, and just look at that. Huge, great big, thick, very fibrous crown of horseradish root with these little spurs coming out where the new growth starts. Now all those will transplant as a new plant, but what I'm wanting to do is harvest off a decent lump of this fresh white root that we can grate and form a horseradish. And I'm looking at this thinking I'm not going to get much growth from this bit, so I'm going to take my spade right the way through there and take this whole lump off. And I'll also probably take a few smaller bits just to see if that's too fibrous or not white all the way through. You're really looking for some lovely white root. So let's have a go. Well, I've severed this section. Very mature piece this. Ideally you'd be looking for something a little thinner like this. That's probably more than enough to make a good portion of a good strength horseradish sauce. And we're going to clean this up now, because what we want to do, get all the soil from that just with a brush under a tap, and then we'll peel it, take it in and show you how to prepare it into a sauce. Well, this is the horseradish that you saw us digging up just a few minutes ago. It's incredibly woody. I think these, particularly this stem, I thought it was a solid piece, but just look, it's almost hollowed out. And I think this is a really mature planted root. The thinner one's probably going to be far more use. Now I've started peeling this. You can see it's pretty unattractive when you dig it up. Very brown and woody, but as soon as you start peeling it just with a normal potato peeler, you get this nice clean white root that's not too fibrous. So I'm going to work away on these just with a peeler and a knife. I'll probably have to cut this into sections to be able to peel it with it being so contorted, and we'll see what volume of horseradish we're left with once we've cleaned this all up. Well, after working with a peeler and chopping it into sections, because it's quite contorted and the way it rotates round makes it almost impossible to peel, I'm left with these quite nice chunky sections of horseradish which I've cleaned up beautifully. I haven't weighed it yet, because the beauty of the recipe we're going to show you is that we are basically going to show you a recipe that you can determine the volume that you mix or make up depending on how much horseradish you end up once you've grated it. So rather than setting off with a set weight of horseradish as a target, what we're going to do is use what horseradish you may have available and show you the proportions to mix that in with the mayonnaise carrier to make a delicious horseradish. So I'm going to grate this now just with an ordinary grater. Here's my grater, and I'm going to use this section on the grater which is usually for sort of grating cheese into little grated cheese. I'm not going to use the very fine one, that's too much, and the mandolin on that side, you don't want it that big, but this is perfect for what we're going to show you. So let's start grating and produce some grated horseradish onto this wooden board. Okay, well here's our grated horseradish. It's quite a nerve-wracking job because it is so fibrous. So you can see what tends to happen is it shreds itself into these little shards. And you do get a mixture of sizes. So what we're going to do now is run a knife all the way through this, chop it very finely into a really fine, even sort of dice. This is a rustic horseradish that we're going to make, so it's nice to have those little bits of texture. But what you can do with these is, again, just chop the ends off and start chopping this up. So if you haven't got enough or you're struggling for your volume of horseradish, you can then start chopping this with a knife to get a fine dice as opposed to using the shredder. But as I say, if you can get decent sized bits to be able to use one of these graters, then it does speed the job up a little bit. So let's run a knife through this and I'll show you the sort of texture that we're aiming for. Okay, so we've got a really nice coarsely chopped horseradish here, which is as I like it. You may want it finer than this. If you want to use a food processor to really blitz this into a paste, then you can do, but actually in the eating I really like it with this sort of granular coarsey bits of horseradish that you really hit a flavour pocket for. Now when you've grated this, your eyes are starting to sting. The smell of the horseradish is really coming out of it, and we're going to show you a really easy combination now using your favourite mayonnaise. Doesn't have to be this brand, whichever your favourite is. A tablespoon of mayonnaise. I don't think I'm going to be able to do this one-handed, but basically what we're going to do is combine a full heaped tablespoon of mayonnaise and then 2 heaped teaspoons of horseradish and combine. So let's do that. I'm going to have to do it by putting the camera down, and we'll show you it in a minute. So here in a little mixing bowl we've got a heaped tablespoon of mayonnaise and 2 heaped teaspoons of the chopped horseradish, and we're just going to combine that in. It goes into this lovely coarse mix, pure white. And you want to make this about an hour before you're going to serve it, because it will really infuse into that mayonnaise. It's a really easy, cheap way of making a really delicious horseradish sauce to go with your roast beef. And the beauty of this recipe is you can make as much or as little as you've got. You see we've got absolutely loads of horseradish left. I can put another tablespoon of mayonnaise into here and 2 more, and I'm probably going to make about 3 or 4 tablespoons of mayonnaise into this mix and try and use as much of this horseradish as we can. And then any that you don't use on the first sitting you can either have with your cold roast beef later on, or it will keep in a fridge in a jar for up to 5 days after you've made it. So a real quick, easy way. The other thing you can do, it works perfectly well with vegan mayonnaise, so it can be a vegan alternative. I know you're thinking, why would you want to make vegan horseradish sauce when they're not going to have the roast beef? But it is a nice sauce to have with vegan alternatives to the beef. So if you're cooking a corn roast or something like that and serving that to your vegan guests, then this goes really well as a taste explosion, even for a vegan main. Thanks for watching.